heavy deck. He has cards like Bonfire of the Damned, which he has 4 copies of this weekend. That number has fluctuated him for so long. He has a card like Olivia Voldaren, 3 of, that's fantastic against Nelson, 2 Tragic Slips, 2 Pillar of Flames, 1 Abrupt Decay. He's got a lot of removal that's good against Brad. But Brad's deck has a lot of resilient threats, as we saw a little bit earlier in his match against Chiho Yim yesterday. So his threats are so resilient. Can he push through all of Reid's removal and his efficient creatures?
Well, this is a little different matchup than we saw yesterday, because yes, Brad's deck is resilient against removal. However, Reid's not really trying to wrath Brad off the board. He's trying to just develop these dominating board presences with cards like Huntmaster and Thragtusk, and then use cards like Bonfire to sort of clean up some of the ground so they can push through his attackers. The other thing that Reid has to his advantage is Olivia Voldaren, which is really, really effective in this matchup, because Brad only has 4 copies of Tragic Slip to really deal with an Olivia.
Yep.
So, and Reid does start things off exactly the way his deck needs to, with a turn 2 Farseek, which really gets his deck going.
Yeah, Farseek makes this deck look completely different when they do or do not have it, but Duke has Farseek on the play. Nelson with a Voice of Resurgence, trying to catch up a little bit here, but we'll see how Duke wants to play his 3rd turn, if he does have the 4th land or not.
And looks like Vampire Nighthawk comes down. Another effective threat for Reid's side of the board, allows him to get a little bit of a life swing going. He also has the 4th land, so... And it looks like Brad has just nothing but a High Priest on turn 2 and fails to hit his 3rd land drop.
Yeah, that's a tough start there for Nelson. You bring up Vampire Nighthawk. This is a card that has kind of fluctuated a little bit in and out of this deck a little bit here, and the reason for that is because, you know, it's a card that I think is metagame dependent. There's some metagames where it's absolutely fantastic, others where it's not anywhere you want to be, but I think a lot of people coming into this tournament expected a lot of aggressive decks.
Yeah, you definitely thought there'd be more aggro or even mid-range aggro than control. And I think if you're going into the tournament, like Nighthawk's just one of those cards that it seems innocuous, just a 2/3 flyer with lifelink, but it actually has a pretty big impact on the game.
So now Duke is going to come across the Nighthawk. He's going to play an Overgrown Tomb untapped, plays a Garruk Primal Hunter, and is going to put a Beast into play.
Yeah, and pretty good start for Reid here. Obviously, Garruk is a great card against most decks, especially if they don't have that much pressure on you to deal with it right away. Brad does have the High Priest. He doesn't have a 3rd land, but he did draw a Cartel Aristocrat, so he can actually activate his High Priest this turn by playing the Aristocrat, sacking the Voice of Resurgence. The token will come back into play, giving him 2 creatures that he can tap, along with the High Priest to get a Demon. So even though he misses his 3rd land drop, he will be able to continue to develop his board presence here.
Yeah, he's going to be able to put a 5/5 into play via the High Priest, and then his Elemental is going to be a 4/4 because there will be an Elemental, a High Priest, a Cartel Aristocrat, and the Demon. So, not so, I mean, given that he doesn't have a 3rd land,
yeah,
you know, not so bad.
And that's kind of the good thing about Junk Aristocrats, is because the curve is so low and there's so many interesting synergies at that low point, you can actually do a lot of interesting things early on that can, even though you only have 2 mana, you can still function as a deck.
So Nelson's going to serve in here with the Voice of Resurgence, try to attack Garruk. Duke immediately blocks with his Beast token. We're going to have an Elemental token coming into play here in a moment. That's why you haven't seen Brad make a move yet. So he's going to search through those tokens there to get an Elemental token. And I actually like that attack a lot. Like, I think, you know, a high percent of the time Reid is going to block there. But now Nelson can still, you know, play a creature post-combat, might just play a Voice of Resurgence here, and then make a Demon. So I like that attack.
Yeah, so basically, Reid pretty much can choose to maybe not block there. If he chooses not to block, maybe afraid of triggering Morbid, I think he's okay with that because he still has enough of a board presence where he's not too afraid of it. And Brad still has the Aristocrat, so if Reid doesn't block, then he can just play the Aristocrat post-combat and then still sacrifice his creature and trigger Morbid.
Now, one thing I want people to keep track of at home as well is watch the way that Reid draws his card. And the reason I mention that is because I've watched Reid play Jund a lot, and you know, every time he draws his card, he kind of draws it pretty slowly, shuffles his hand around, and then draws a card. Now, of course, when you have 4 bonfires in your deck, you want to be very careful how you draw, but there are a lot of times where he's drawing a card and he thinks for a long time about the card that he's drawn before he adds it to his hand, kind of insinuating that maybe it is a bonfire, maybe it isn't, because, you know, with Bonfire of the Damned, it's like, if it's bonfire, people just turn it over and they're like, woohoo!
Yeah.
You know, stuff like that. But Reid actually takes a long time to think about his draw steps, and even when it is a bonfire, he thinks for a little while, too.
Yeah, he certainly telegraphs it somewhat to the point where you kind of can expect that it's coming, so you can play your next turn around it. However, there are some times where there's not much you can do about a Bonfire of the Damned off the top of the deck. So, in general, I don't think it really impacts the game that much, but if you are paying attention, I think it does help to just kind of notice that your opponent is kind of playing for those miracles sometimes.
So Duke is going to putrefy the elemental token. He's going to tragic slip the High Priest, and no more demons here for Nelson, and does just come across with a beast, holding the Vampire Nighthawk on defense and ticking up the Garrick. Now Nelson does draw a land this turn in Goblet Shrine, but he's got a lot of ground to make up here.
Yeah, and that Vampire Nighthawk is really doing a great job here, because even though Brad can develop his board, he really can't attack through that Nighthawk. He can attack with the elemental token, but again, Nighthawk can just trade with it now, and now Reid's going to gain 2 life. He still has that Garrick in play. He can choose to maybe draw 3 cards potentially next turn, and then place. We do know he has a Rakdos Return in his hand, it looks like. So I think Brad just has 4 cards in his hand. So if he draws a land, there's a chance he might be able to just cast Rakdos Return for 4 and empty Brad's grip, leaving him just with 2 Spirit tokens and an Elemental Voice of Resurgence.
So you saw Nelson play the Lingering Souls pre-combat, try to attack the Garrick with his 4/4 elemental, Reid exchanging with Vampire Nighthawk, netting himself 2 life as well. You can definitely tell that Reid is in the driver's seat right now, and Nelson is trying to catch up. And when you're Jund and you're ahead on board and trying to get your opponent dead, that's a very comfortable feeling, because normally as a control deck in Jund, you're trying to stabilize the game and then turn the corner. But because Nelson's had some trouble with mana, Reid's always been ahead this game.
Yeah, when you're Jund and you can actually attack your opponent, you feel you're in a pretty good space. So I think Reid is happy where he's at right now, especially if Brad plans on double blocking here. Brad will just be left with a Spirit token and Elemental token. So now Reid can choose to draw 3 cards, and he won't lose his Garrick in the air to the Spirit tokens.
And so there is the 4th land and the Rakdos Return that you mentioned, clearing out Nelson's hand, making him discard a Garrick Relentless, 2 copies of Cartel Aristocrat, another Lingering Soul. So a big play there from Duke, as he is just going to make another beast token and pass the turn back. Nelson draws a card.
So it's just a land that we're going to look like we're going to double flashback at Lingering Souls. So Garrick won't be able to get attacked for lethal this turn. However, the Elemental token will go up to becoming a 6/6. So if he probably have to chump block here if he wants to keep his Garrick alive.
Yeah, and I imagine he does want to keep his Garrick alive. So you see Duke immediately chump block. Going to go down to 5 is the Garrick from the Spirit token, but Garrick is the primary card that's really dominating this game. Again, Duke has chosen not to draw cards with it yet. Depending on what his hand is, you see him take his time right now. He might draw 3 this go.
Yeah, I think he needs to now to try to draw into a bonfire, but we'll see what he does here. Oh, well, if he attacks first, this is interesting to see, because if he attacks first and Brad just triple blocks, then he can no longer draw 3 cards.
Yeah, I mean, it leads me to believe that maybe Duke has, like a Thragtusk or something in his hand. I honestly think he's putting Brad to the test here. Do you want to triple block? Because then your Elemental token becomes so poor.
Yeah.
It's a really interesting attack.
Yeah, because a Thragtusk and then draw 5 and being okay with just losing your Garrick the next turn is pretty. It's not a bad position to be in, because you're still drawing 5 cards. Yes, you're losing a Garrick, but you're drawing 5 cards, getting a Thragtusk onto the board. So let's see what Reid's follow-up is. I can't really make out what his hand is, but Brad decides not to triple block.
And Reid's going to tick this
Looks like he's just going to tick it up here. So Garrick is still going to be in play. Brad does not have enough creatures to attack it just yet. And here comes Huntmaster.
Okay. So Duke going to add 2 life and a couple 2/2s to the board. Still not drawing cards with Garrick quite yet, as Nelson draws a Sun Petal Grove for the turn, and he is going to concede the game. So Reid Duke is going to win game number 1 here over Brad Nelson. Jund up a game against Junk Aristocrats. The reason you see the concession there is because Huntmaster is going to flip into Ravager of the Fells, and Duke just has complete control of the game there, because Nelson's going to have to attack his Garrick with some number of Spirit tokens, and things are just not beneficial for him at that point.
Yeah, Brad's life was just too low there, and it didn't look like he even had a spell, so he would have had to pass the turn, and the Huntmaster would have just flipped naturally into the Ravager. So Reid Duke wins the first game, and we move into sideboard now, and Brad doesn't really have that many cards that he can bring in against Jund. I don't think Jund was one of the decks that he was really trying to beat after board. Maybe he figured his game 1 was good enough. He does have some cards. He has 2 copies of Appetite for Brains, which I think definitely come in, help you deal with cards like Olivia, Thragtusk. He has 2 copies of Duress, which I also think he wants to bring in to deal with cards like Bonfire of the Damned. He has one Sin Collector, which is pretty good against Jund in general.
Agreed, a lot of spells here.
Yeah, a lot of spells. And Obzidot Ghost Council, which is another just durable threat. Obviously, Reid has cards like Putrefy, which can attack it. But in general, if you're bringing in Duress and Sin Collector, that gives you a little coverage so that your Obzidot could actually win the game for you later on. So probably bringing in those 6 cards. And what he's taking out, I don't think Blood Artist is that great in this matchup. I know Brad's written articles before in the past where he felt that Blood Artist was a little weak in this matchup. Same thing with High Priest, maybe.
Sure.
It's tough to actually get it to trigger against Jund because of all the early removal they have. So it'll be interesting to see what he decides to board out. But I think Blood Artist is probably one of the cards that probably gets boarded out.
So we take a look here at Duke's sideboard. 2 copies of Duress, 2 Tragic Slip, 1 Rakdos' Return, 2 Ground Seal, 1 Curse of Death's Hold, 1 Pillar of Flame, 3 Liliana the Veil, 2 Rorick Thar the Unbowed, and 1 Underworld Connections. Cards that really jump out to you here at first, for me at least, is Tragic Slip, as it played a huge role in that game, being able to take care of that Scourge Stack High Priest, but also with the shenanigans that Brad's deck does have. Brad has Tragic Slip of his own that he can reliably turn on, so as a result, Tragic Slip is going to be good against him. You take a look here at some other cards. Pillar of Flame, I think I like quite a bit here in this matchup as well. And Curse of Death's Hold is the big one, where it's only one of in Reid's sideboard, but you take a look at Brad's deck with the Doom Travelers, the Lingering Souls, and just making the creatures smaller in general is very useful in this matchup, I believe.
Yeah, Brad's basic only answer to Curse of Death's Hold is either the 2 Appetite for Brains or the 2 Duress. So a resolved Curse of Death's Hold is very, very effective against him. All his creatures will effectively die to it. He has some things, like a High Priest can survive, maybe if he has some of the demon tokens in play. He has Garruk Relentless, obviously Obzidot, but in general, Curse of Death's Hold is a beating against any of the versions of Aristocrats. And so interesting to see how these players decide to board. They're both getting ready for game 2, drawing their 7 cards hand to see if they're comfortable with them. It looks like Brad definitely is. He's on the play, and Reid is pondering it. It looks like he's okay too. So we're off to the races here. Turn 1, Woodland Cemetery from Brad.
Yeah, no early start stuff. Let's see if he has a Buddy Land draw or not. You see him draw Varls for the turn. He does have a Buddy Land draw and a Young Wolf for turn number 2.
So he doesn't have an actual basic forest swamp plain, so he has to put that Isolated Chaplain into play tapped. It looks like he does have the Blood Artist in his hand, so it looks like he decided to keep in the Blood Artist for this matchup.
Maybe that incremental damage does end up adding up, and again, if you're Duke, the first thing that you might actually have to kill in the matchup is Blood Artist. And then you can kind of work your way around everything else. Pillar of Flame going to take down the Young Wolf here, but Duke going to have to pay 2 life to do that via an untapped Stomping Ground, as Nelson draws a Temple Garden for the turn.
So it looks like we have Varals, Temple Garden, Voice of Resurgence, Garruk, Gavany Township, and here comes that Voice of Resurgence for the turn, and a Temple Garden comes to play tapped. So let's see if Reid has another Pillar Flame to deal with that Voice of Resurgence. It looks like he does.
Yeah, he tapped it quick. He did tap that mountain very quick and then played a Woodland Cemetery.
So looks like we might have a Garruk coming into play here for Brad Nelson. Planeswalker's generally pretty good against control decks. However, Reid does have 4 copies of Bonfire Dam, so Bonfire is pretty good at cleaning up Garruk.
The tough part here with Garruk is like he kind of, you kind of want to catch your opponent by surprise. Like they play Olivia Voldaren and then you play your Garruk and you kill it. Or the same can be said with Huntmaster and you flip into Garruk the Veil Cursed. We see Brad just play Garruk on an empty board, make a Wolf token, and then pass the turn back, which is again a perfectly reasonable play because you just want to get this established, I think.
Well, it makes Reid's 4th turn a little awkward if he just wants to play a Huntmaster into a Garruk. So, but Reid misses his 4th land drop here, and he's going to be under a lot of pressure now because he's facing an active Garruk and only has 3 lands in play. It looks like he has a couple of high-end drops stuck in his hand like Thragtusk. So Brad's going to continue to develop his board. He's going to play a Blood Artist now and a Cartel Aristocrat.
Now, opening himself up a little bit to being hit with a Bonfire the Damned off the top here for Duke, but again, it's not the end of the world because Blood Artist is going to get some points of damage across. Cartel Aristocrat can protect itself, and the Garruk the Veil Cursed, Garruk Relentless, if Duke were to redirect over there, would leave a Garruk the Veil Cursed with 1 counter. So, if a Miracle Bonfire were to come off the top here, it would not be the end of the world for Nelson.
Yeah, definitely not. And it would also mean that Reid would continue to miss his 4th land drop. So definitely not the end of the world for Brad here. But Reid draws yet another 5-drop in Garruk Primal Hunter. So very unfortunate here for Reid. Doesn't have any mana to really cast any of the action spells in his hand. He had those 2 Pillar Flames early on, but beyond that, really no interaction here.
so far, both of these games, both players have had some mana troubles. You know, you saw Nelson last game have some mana issues. Now he's going to play a Varls in his second main phase after coming across for 4 points of damage. And Duke this game having some mana issues, as you said, after a little bit of early plays with Pillar of Flames, not able to hit his 4th land drop on time, and just having a little bit of difficulty.
Yeah, and Brad's deck obviously functions so much better under mana restrictions than Reid's deck, so a little unfortunate here. Here comes Huntmaster to give Reid a little breathing room in terms of 2 blockers along with 2 life. However, Brad does have that active Garrick, and if he chooses, he can kill the Huntmaster with the Garrick and drain him with the Blood Artist.
And that's what we're going to see. Garrick Relentless is going to fight that Huntmaster of the Fells. Going to flip into Garrick the Veil Cursed. Little drain here from the Blood Artist. You see Nelson going to come across with his creatures momentarily. We might see a little bit of scavenge action. You see Brad kind of reaching around a little bit here. Young Wolf going to get played pre-combat. Going to come across with everybody, except for Blood Artist here. Make things very, very difficult here on Duke.
And the best thing I like about Reid's game is, despite the fact that he's likely just facing a lethal attack here, he never concedes. He always forces you to kill him.
Yep.
And that's something that people do too often. They'll just concede before they're actually dead.
Yep.
You should always force your opponents to do something, because there's a good chance they'll just make a mistake.
Yeah, you can.
Even if the mistake won't cost them the game, it still might get into their head and affect them in the next game. Either way, never concede.
Yeah, I mean,
unless there's like time considerations.
Of course.
But in a situation like this, I love the fact that Reid just makes you go through it.
Yeah, and you know, it's funny because it's not like, for some people concede and some people make them go through it. And for Reid, his behavior has always been consistent. He never ever concedes, as you said.
Mm-hmm.
He always just like, all right, if you're gonna win, you're gonna win, but you're gonna have to kill me to do so. And I think that is a good habit to be in, because I can speak for myself, in which I have won very few games. Maybe I can count on one hand where I'm pretty much dead, but you make your opponent kill you, and then they overthink everything.
Yeah.
Because they're basically saying, why aren't you conceding? I'm pretty sure you're dead, and then they may overthink things and make an error that they would not otherwise make. You're giving yourself an opportunity, be it 1% or 2%, to maybe claw your way back from an unwinnable game.
In general, the more decisions you force your opponent to make, the higher the chance that they'll eventually make a mistake. And whether or not that mistake might cost them the game, it doesn't matter as much, because there is still a chance that that mistake might end up costing them in the future, maybe in the second game or the third game.
Yeah.
So in general, you want to always force your opponent to make as many decisions as possible, even in the face of like a lethal attack, like what we just saw there with Reid.
I agree with you. So if you guys are just joining us, Cedric Phillips, Osa Bodavich here in the booth. StarCityGames.com bringing you Grand Prix Miami. We are in round number 11 of 15 so far. If you do want to join us on Twitter, feel free all day long at SCG Live, hashtag GPMIami. We're going to be crowning a champion at some point today.
Could be one of these two.
It could be one.
Sitting at both at 10-0, they're in a pretty sweet spot here to make top 8. I don't think anyone would be surprised if either of these players make top 8. They both have so much success.
Yeah.
Well revered among the pro community, along with the casual community, for all their work on Star City. I think they write, sometimes I feel like they write more than one article a week. I think I see something from Reid or Brad sometimes twice a week even.
Yeah,
oftentimes
you're
articles.
going to see 3 pieces of content from Brad every week. He does his versus video with Todd Anderson. He does his versus video with Jerry Thompson. Also, we'll be on Above the Curve, or sometimes just do a Magic Online video. For Duke, you'll often see him write an article on Thursdays, and you'll see a Magic Online video from him about every other week as well, oftentimes playing either Bant or Jund.
And the other interesting thing about these two players, somewhat how they're connected, is they both really made a name for themselves on Magic Online.
Yes.
But prior to Magic Online, it'd be interesting to see how their careers would have panned out, because Brad was obviously from North Dakota, where there's not a huge Magic presence compared to New York, where Reid is from.
Yep.
But thanks to Magic Online, it didn't really matter. Both were able to game a lot and get the practice they need in order to become the players they are today.
So we see the starts here for each player. Nelson with just an isolated Chaplain Pass in the turn back. Duke with probably the best start that his deck can have in a Farseek on turn 2. And you saw the difference between, last game where he was stumbling around on mana and didn't have a Farseek, in this game where he's Farseeking on the play. He already has 3 lands, Nelson's 1, and that means Olivia Valderin or Huntmaster of the Fells can show up way ahead of schedule.
Yeah, it's actually just night and day how much better his deck looks when he's on the play with a Farseek.
Yeah.
It's just shocking.
Yeah.
And it's one of the reasons why Farseek decks are so frustrating to play against, because if your opponent has that Farseek, you just feel like, oh god, if he just didn't have that Farseek, I'd be in such better position right now.
Yeah.
But Reid does have the Farseek, and it looks like Brad doesn't really even have any green mana here. So looked like he kept a pretty solid hand with a lot of resilient threats and Obsidian Lingering Souls. Unfortunately, he didn't have any green mana. He just had multiple Isolated Chapels and a Godless Shrine, so he's going to have to pass the turn back here with no play.
Yeah, and if you're Duke, you're absolutely thrilled. No play on turn 1 or turn 2. Not that Brad's plays are very high impact ones, like maybe a Flint of Pour or a Burning Tree Emissary draw, but to have nothing on the opening turns of the game, if you're Duke, you're thrilled. Now, Duke doesn't have a turn 4 play, which is a little bit surprising, but you see Nelson's going to play an Isolated Chapel, rearrange his mana a little bit, and maybe we are going to see a Lingering Souls or something of that nature, but we see a Doom Traveler in Nelson's hand. His hand is very interesting. He has multiple green cards in Voice of Resurgence, Garruk Relentless. He does have that Obsidian that you talked about. He just plays Doom Traveler and passes the turn back, as Duke is going to draw a card for the turn now.
So, yeah, it doesn't, I'm not sure. Maybe he doesn't have a Lingering Souls in his hand. Maybe it's just a Swamp and a Voice of Resurgence. So, Reid actually misses his 5th land drop, giving Brad an out to actually start to gain a little bit of advantage here. He does draw Woodland Cemetery, and we could see Garruk here.
Now this is a very interesting game here, because Duke Farseeks, and we talk about how insane Farseek is, and then, you know, he has 4 mana on turn 3, doesn't do anything with it, which means his hand is either A, removal heavy, or B, 5 mana spell heavy.
Yeah, and Reid's in a lot of trouble now, because not only did he miss his 5th land drop last turn, giving Brad back the initiative, he's actually potentially facing down an Obsidian next turn from Brad. Brad does have a 5th land, and he does have that Obsidian. And although Reid does have answers, you generally want to be able to answer an Obsidian when you have some sort of amount of pressure or board presence, which Reid has none of. So facing down a Garruk Primal Hunter and an Obsidian when you have nothing in play can be a very daunting task. So let's see if Reid can actually mount some sort of offensive here.
That's no situation I want to be in. As you saw, Reid put his top card on the table, thought about it for a very long time, put it to his hand, so, you know, presumably not a Bonfire of the Damned Miracles. I think that's something he would have cast this turn, but he's going to play a Bonfire for 1 and then Pillar from Garruk, so he's going to be able to clean up some of the things that are going on here. Nelson going to be left with a Wolf token and a Spirit token after Duke's turn is done.
Wow, so really not an effective turn for Reid there.
What a huge draw there from Nelson. Draws another green source. His 5th land is here. He can actually play now. That Obsidian Ghost Council beginning to take over this game, presuming that Duke does not have a Putrefy in his hand.
Wow, so Obsidian not coming down. Brad casting double Voice of Resurgence and basically saying, you're going to have to deal with these cards first. And I actually like this play a lot, because if he plays the Obsidian next turn, the only way you can actually deal with the Obsidian is with an instant. And if you have 2 Voice of Resurgence in play, it's kind of awkward, because you're going to get all those elemental tokens off the trigger.
Nelson drawing his lands, now draws an Overgrown Tomb for the turn. So let's see how he wants to navigate this turn. Maybe just the Spirit in the Air. Maybe he comes with the Voice of Resurgences. If he does Duke have interest in trading a Wolf token with one? Maybe Huntmaster as well with the other one. So very interesting how Nelson A wants to craft it, and B what Duke wants to do with it.
Yeah, I think because it looks like Brad might actually have a Tragic Slip in his hand too. So if he sends with the Wolf and the Spirit and can bait Reid into blocking the Wolf with his Wolf, then he can actually Tragic Slip the Huntmaster after Morbid Trigger, and then play another land and play the Obsidian, and have an Obsidian double Voice of Resurgence against Reid's empty board. So it looks like Brad's going to attack with everything here. Basically goading Reid to block something.
Yeah, it feels like with this attack, Nelson is very happy if any blocks take place.
Yeah. So it looks like a Wolf is just going to block a Wolf, and Brad's going to get in for 5. Dropping Reid to 3. Wouldn't be surprised if we saw a Tragic Slip on the Huntmaster and then a land Obsidian.
Yeah, which would be just a huge turn.
Again, there's a chance that Brad might not be concerned with the Huntmaster. Maybe he wants to save that Tragic Slip for a potential Olivia next turn, or a Thragtusk potentially. But again, I think the fact that Reid missed his 5th land drop for several turns now, I think Brad just wants to kind of dominate the board right now as soon as he can. Obsidian double Voice of Resurgence is a pretty good place to be. So.
Yeah, it's really not the worst place to be. You see Brad really taking his time with this turn too. It feels like to me, and obviously we can't hear him talk or anything, but you just take a look at him and the way he's kind of playing. It feels like he's a little bit scared to cast this Obsidian. I think at the end of the day he's going to cast it, which he does, but he is a little bit scared to put that out there, and he's going to blink it out just because it is pretty much his primary way to win right now.
Well, the thing is, I also think nerves get to you at a certain point. I mean, obviously he's ahead, but there comes the thought into your head of, okay, make sure you don't mess this one up, because you're 10-0. You have a good shot of winning here. Your opponent misses several land drops. You got a pretty good board position right here. Just make sure you play everything correctly. Your sequencing is correct. So I think that's really kind of what's going through his head right now. Just make sure you play correctly, because you don't want to throw this one away. And it looks like Brad is playing very well right here. He's making all the correct sequences. Obzedat now comes back into play, drains Reid for another 2, and he's got pretty much free reign to just attack with everything right here.
And that's what he's going to do. Turn them all sideways here is Nelson, putting Duke to the test, sitting at, I believe, 11 life right now. You see Reid with his hands through typically wonderful hair, but it's decision time, and it's not an easy one.
He can, you're kind of in this awkward position where, okay, the only creature that you can block and trade with is a Voice of Resurgence, but if you do that, you give your Brad just an elemental token that's actually larger than the Voice, so you're kind of left to just chump block an Obzedat here and take 5 damage, dropping you to 6, and Obzedat will phase out and drain you again for 2 later on. So
I really think right now, Osip, that Reid, he has Thrag Tusk or Tusks, plural, in his hand based off of that block. He is just trying to make it to the next turn, hopefully peeling a 5th mana source and being able to play Thragtusk.
Well, the good news for Reid is it doesn't look like Brad has another play, so Huntmaster, I believe, can flip on his upkeep, dealing with either the Spirit Token or the Voice of Resurgence. One of the Voice of Resurgence, rather. So I think he might actually just deal with the Spirit Token.
I mean, do you take down a Voice? Because it's going to leave a 3/3 elemental behind. Obzedat comes back, makes that elemental a 4/4, and then any creatures that Brad does draw as a creature or a Lingering Souls makes that elemental absolutely gigantic, or do you just take down the Spirit Token and make it so there are no more flyers in play?
Yeah, I think if he has Thragtusk in play in his hand, then I think he might just take out the Spirit Token and hope to draw 5th land here, because Thragtusk and a 4/4 Ravager of the Fells isn't that bad of a place to be. But it looks like he does take out the Voice of Resurgence. He's going to be down. He's going to be at 6 life. He'll be drained for 2 more when Obzedat comes back into play. So we're at the situation where Brad might be able to just win by phasing out Obzedat. He might not even have to attack anymore. So let's see what Reid's draw is.
This is a very, very, very important draw here, and you see the way he draws it very slowly. Not Bonfire the Damned again. The question is it a 5th land? Additionally, Duke could have 2 spells to play this turn. I think 2 spells, again, is a very good place to be. Flipping that Ravager of the Fells back into a Huntmaster, putting a Wolf Token in play, but most importantly, pushing Duke up to 8 life. So, we'll see.
If there are 2 removal spells, it looks like he might have 1 copy of Tragic Slip.
I believe I see a Tragic Slip in his hand as well. He has, again, 2 Tragic Slips in his main deck and 2 in his sideboard. So if he has a play like a Tragic Slip on the Elemental token, Tragic Slip somewhere else, flips the Huntmaster back down, he can start to gain a little bit of ground here. But you see him really taking his time. I mean, this game feels very far from over.
Yeah, it's if Brad can brick on a couple more draws here, and Reid can actually kind of gain some momentum and start to draw lands and cast all those spells in his hand, there's a chance he might still be able to pull this out. It all depends on, it looks like he has a Tragic Slip and Putrefy, so he's trying to determine, okay, do I have to Tragic Slip and Putrefy something on my turn so I can flip my Ravager of the Fells, or do I have to save my Putrefy to deal with the Obzedat that comes in? It seems like that might be the choice. Can't really make out what's in his hand, but it looks like that's potentially what he's debating right here.
Well, he's going to go a reaching.
Because you're likely going to cast a Tragic Slip now because you want to deal with that, with the Elemental token. Now, do you use the Putrefy 2 to flip your Ravager of the Fells, or do you just deal with the Obzedat on Brad's turn? Again, there's benefits on both sides. I think you probably want to just kill the Obzedat, but you would end up giving Brad an Elemental token.
So he's going to slip the flyer. It did have Morbid, so he could have chosen to take down Voice of Resurgence, and he did draw a land, and Overgrown Tomb puts into play tapped and passes the turn back.
So
that's
pretty good. Yeah, so pretty good turn. He ended up did having 2 Tragic Slips, not a Putrefy. He might still have the Putrefy, but he had a 5th land as well. So he finally drew his 5th land for the turn. Is able to cast 2 spells to flip his Ravager of the Fells and get another Wolf into play and gain 2 life. So Reid's gonna get drained down to 6 when Obzedat comes back into play on Brad's turn. But Brad only really has an Obzedat and a Voice of Resurgence now, which Reid can actually block and chump the Obzedat and actually trade with the Voice of Resurgence.
So Nelson's going to come across with both creatures now, it looks like, an Obzedat and Voice of Resurgence. and make Reid make a decision here. So you see Duke is going to put a wolf token in front of this. He's happy going down to 4 via Voice of Resurgence. So let's see what Nelson has drawn for the turn.
And it looks like Brad might have drawn an Obsidian.
That's what it looks like to me too.
Which is a pretty good, a bad and a good draw for Reid, because it means that Brad can't cast a spell this turn, which means that Huntmaster of Fells will be able to flip and deal with the Voice of Resurgence. But unfortunately, if Reid does eventually deal with the Obsidian, Brad has a second.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a good bad scenario here. But in general, I think Reid's happy to just actually get a flip right here.
Yeah, this is a tough one here because Nelson's going to play Overgrown Tomb. He's going to blink Obsidian out and just pass the turn back, which means that, as you said, Duke's Huntmaster is going to flip again to Ravager of the Fells.
And you could see Brad kind of shipped. You can kind of see he seemed a little dejected. He still thinks he's maybe in decent shape, but you can kind of feel like maybe something's slipping away here. He has his 5th land now. I got to make sure I can try to close this out as soon as I can. Unfortunately, his draws just haven't been that good in the last few turns. So let's see if Reid can maybe cast 2 spells again this turn to reflip the Ravager, or actually, so yeah, it definitely looks like he has a Putrefy in his hand. So he does have an answer for one of the Obsidians, the one that's in play. It looks like he actually has a Tragic Slip too. So it would be a really amazing sequence if he's able to putrefy the Obsidian when it comes back into play during the attack. Brad can't really attack with the Elemental token because there's a 4/4 Ravager in play. And then if Brad tries to cast a second Obsidian, he'll be able to drain Reid. Oh, here's a Thragtusk instead. Wow, so that's even better card for Reid right here. It gives him 5 life, and it actually block an Obsidian.
Yeah, this thing Thragtusk lets him fight with Obsidian all day long. So now what we might end up seeing is Obsidian just going back and forth, in and out.
Does Reid attack here? I think Reid attacks here.
Oh boy. I mean, sitting at 9.
Wow.
I think you can make a reason for an attack, but also you want to be able to play a little bit safer.
Yeah, because if Brad goes Lingering Souls, flashback Lingering Souls, the Elemental will get much bigger. Maybe you'll need to. Maybe you'll feel like you need to chump block it there.
Is it time to turn the corner yet? Duke decides that it's not. Nelson draws a land to go along with that Obsidian, and so he is flooding badly right now. After keeping a hand that didn't have any green mana sources, he drew a green mana source. But Duke is clawing his way back into this game in a big way after not having a 5th land for a very long time. We knew he had spells, we just didn't know which ones he had. Really good balance here with the Huntmaster of the Fells in this game by Duke.
And this just goes to show you the difference between mana flooding and mana screw. When you get mana screwed, it's going to be awkward because your opponent can take advantage of it early on. But if they can't close it out, and you start drawing out of it, you're still going to have a bunch of really good spells in your hand.
Yep.
If you're mana flooded, it's so much worse because you're just sitting there with no action. And that's exactly what we're seeing here. Reid Duke getting mana screwed early on and drawing out of it, whereas Brad Nelson now is getting mana flooded. So it looks like Reid might have drawn another spell for this turn, and he's in a really good shape here because Brad is basically just playing the game of maybe my Obsidian can just drain you out by phasing each turn. But Reid,
this is the scary thing for Nelson, right? Because now Duke is starting to attack. Last turn he didn't attack. Now he's going to play Stomping Grounds, and now he is starting to attack, and he's going to pass the turn back. But he's passing the turn back with 5 mana available.
Yeah, and I think he does have the Putrefy too. So we could just see a Putrefy here and potentially a Tragic Slip. So the Ravager of Fells could flip again on his turn, giving him another 2 life and another wolf.
So Nelson draws yet another land now. Obsidian did come back. He said, I'm going to try to blink this out. There's the Putrefy that you spoke of to take care of the Obsidian. And now Duke is just going to untap and keep right on going.
And here we go. With 9 power now on the board, he could potentially close out Brad relatively quickly. Or we're going to see another Thragtusk here. A Curse of Deathhold. Wow, so the Elemental is only a 1/1, so that does fall to the Curse of Deathhold. And now Reid swings over for 9. Brad does have that Obsidian in his hand still, so it's going to allow him to gain some life and put a little more pressure. But, ooh, Ravager of the Fells will flip now because this is the second spell that Reid cast this turn. So Reid will gain a little life cushion here and go up to 7.
If you're Nelson right now, you're kind of happy because Duke has no more cards in his hand.
Yeah.
So for that, if you're looking for positives, that's one of them. Huntmaster is going to come back, Wolf Token, and Duke going to go to 7 life. And another thing to keep in mind here too, as well, Osip, is that Obsidian is going to be a 4/4, not a 5/5. As far as the math adds up here, that can make a difference.
Because Reid will drop to 5 because the Obsidian are coming into play, and that is not a lethal attack now because of Curse of Deathhold. So definitely will make an impact. and it also shuts off a lot of Brad's draws. There's not many cards left in his deck that can survive through the Curse of Death's Hold. So he was getting land flooded before, and now his potential draws are even worse.
Nelson choosing to blink out the Obsidian here. Now his draw for the turn was a Tragic Slip, but he did play a spell. Now Reid's going to slowly draw his card. And for some reason, I do not believe that's a Bonfire of the Damned.
So let's see what he has to leave at least one creature back to block. Probably Thragtusk is probably your best blocker, just because if Brad does have a removal spell, you'll still get a beast token.
Yeah, but what does it do to the math? That's the question. For his math, to try to get Brad dead to shorten the number of draw steps that he can have. Because ideally, if you're Reid Duke, you want to let this game go on probably 2 more turns. You want to close this game out. Yes,
yep.
You're cutting a lot of his outs with Curse of Death's Hold, so you're turning off a lot of his cards. But again, you don't know Brad's exact list, and you want to get this game over as quickly as you possibly can. So what attacks can you make to make sure that that happens?
Yeah, I think you have to kind of play somewhat cautiously here. If you attack for just there, you drop him down to 11. If you play no spells, you can flip your Huntmaster of the Fells to do another 2 damage, so you drop him to 9, and that is an lethal attack next turn if Brad decides to phase anything out. So let's see, does Reid have a spell this turn? It looks like it's just a land. He's going to allow the Huntmaster to flip. He's going to flip and deal 2 damage to Brad, potentially.
So Nelson going to go down to 9, then back up to 11.
Yep.
Because of Obsidian. And Duke going to go down to
Ooh,
3.
Good draw. Oh, wait, actually, terrible draw to Lingering Soul.
Yeah,
There's a Curse of Death's Hold in place.
It's the worst draw that he could have.
I think he can. Well, it could trigger Morbid, right? If he casts Lingering Souls, the creatures will die, and then Morbid will be triggered, so that Tragic Slip will get turned on, and can deal potentially with the Ravager of the Fells or the. Oh, so it's a.
Okay, so what
Doom
that
Traveler.
draws is Doom Traveler, yes. And so now he's going to Tragic Slip Huntmaster of the Fells.
So the Ravager dies now. So he doesn't have to worry about any of those shenanigans, life gain, etc. And he won't have to face a lethal attack next turn now.
Yeah, so now with Nelson at 11, Duke draws his card. Again, not a Bonfire of the Damned. Interesting to see if it's going to be a spell or not. But you see that Nelson, his priority there was your most problematic card for me is not Thragtusk. It is Huntmaster / Ravager of the Fells. So he takes that out. And now Duke is put to the test here because he's at 3 life. And he has to balance his resources while again trying to cut the draws of Nelson. So how can he attack this turn? Can he get in with Thragtusk? What can he do? Because again, Nelson is gaining 2 life every turn.
Yeah, if he's not, yeah, if he drew another land this turn, he's under a lot of pressure. He basically needs a life gain spell, because Brad basically is going to bring the Obsidian back in, drain Reid to 1, and now we're gonna have a draw here.
This is a Lingering Souls.
Now that's the Lingering Souls. I actually think Reid might have wanted to attack with the Thragtusk that turn, because Brad's really only removal spell is Tragic Slip. There's a chance that he might have Abrupt Decay, but I don't think he would have left it in.
Duke pounds his deck, draws a card.
Oh! Wow. There's that Moorland Haunt. That is one of the few outs that Reid had in his deck that'll allow Reid to attack Brad for lethal the turn before Obsidian was going to come into play and drain Reid for 2 life.
Unbelievable draw there from Duke. Kessig Wolfrun ends up winning the game for Duke. A little knock on the deck, a little spice off the top. Reid Duke moves on to 11-0 over Brad Nelson. Jund defeats Junk Aristocrats. What a 3rd and final game between these 2 unbelievably skilled players. Congratulations to Reid Duke.
Wow, what a great top deck there. Yeah, and he navigated that game really, really well. He was under a lot of stress early on. Brad had a very dominating board position, double Voice of Resurgence, a Spirit Token, and an Obsidian attacking every turn. Reid just had a Huntmaster Fells, stalled on 4 land for a lot of turns. But eventually, you know, Brad started to get a little land flooded. Reid started to draw out of it eventually. And then we got to a point where, okay, this is it. Reid managed to put himself in a position to win if he top decks, and he did. So really, really well played match by both players, I think.